So here at Freedom Online Coalition that's being hosted in Mongolia, we're delighted to have Katrin, Metcalf, a professor, head of research, and we will be talking about the practices in Estonia shifting to e-government. So, hi.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
It's very nice to be here.
So, my first question will be about the practices. How is it hard to completely switch to online system, especially the government system?
Well, first of all, it needs to be done in such a way so that people really have a chance to use these services, which means that one needs to think about the internet access of people. And this needs to be real internet access, and not just to say that there is internet, but that people actually have the possibility of using it and have computers or have somewhere they can go, and also the knowledge. So in Estonia, we started very early, already in the 1990s, having a law which meant that if there were in a village or like so many people living somewhere, there had to be a public internet place, which was the post office or the library or somewhere where people could come and use
So
internet.
is it for free?
For free. This is not anymore very relevant in Estonia because most people have internet at home, and now we have free Wi-Fi in public places, in many public places. But why I'm mentioning this is just that it's important when starting to move the different services online to also think about that people can actually easily get at them, and then to make the services easy to use. And one key thing there is how do you identify yourself online to make secure services. So how do you know that the person is really the person? And there what we have in Estonia is that we have an ID card, basically everybody has. Linked with it are PIN codes, different ones that you use as a digital signature, and this is the same that you use for all different e-services, so different kinds. And I think that's also very important because we work in many countries around the world. And what we sometimes see is that there are too many different ID numbers or cards or certificates, and then people won't use the services because ordinary people don't want to learn 20 different ways of accessing services. So the accessibility and the ease, I think, are the kind of key words.
So what about how about the educating the citizens, the residents, to log in or to do something online, so that it will make, of course it's saves time, makes it easier for the individual to deal with the issues he is facing, right, or she is facing. So on the other hand, it's about the educating the citizens, and on the other hand, it's the security, privacy. So how were these issues addressed in Estonia?
Very good questions, I should say, because you're really putting your finger on the key issues for it. Educating people is very important, and it is something that has to be part of general education, so very much focus on internet, computer use in schools, for instance, because when people get comfortable with using different online services, it's easier to make them use also governance services when you're very familiar with computers. So also targeted training, for instance, for older people, they often don't have that. You know, children already from young age know anyway how to use computers. So we have quite a lot of courses for older people and trying to encourage them to use services. There's also a few small things that, for instance, if you submit your tax return online, if you get some money back from the state, you get it much sooner than if you submit it on paper. So there are these little incentives so that there's a benefit for you to get used to doing it online. You can still do it the traditional way, but say there's something like in it for you to learn it. So these different ways of encouragement. And then the privacy is something that is very key. And when we work in different countries, we also always stress this, that it's not possible, one should not start moving all of these services and so online before there is proper legislation on privacy. There is some oversight mechanism. We have an independent data protection commissioner, which most European countries have, but there's something like that. There needs to be some kind of mechanism that also actually really works. It can't just be on paper, it must be proactive and monitor this. because these two things, also how to get people to use it and the privacy aspect, are very linked. If people are afraid of using these services, which they will be if they don't feel their data is protected, it doesn't matter how many campaigns you make, they won't use them. So that's why I'm not saying that it shouldn't be a quick process to start going to e-governance, but it can't be too quick. There are things that are needed to look into the legal systems. And
so based on the research and the practice you already have, how much time was needed for Estonia to shift?
Well, Estonia did it in a way very quickly, because we started doing it so soon after the re-independence of the country, when the old administrative systems were basically, but they hardly existed, we can say, almost. So it was in that sense almost easier actually to do it, even if of course the technology in the mid-90s was not at all as advanced as it is now, and the internet speed was not such that one could do everything. But in a sense, the idea, let's say, the kind of ideological transformation to go to e-governance happened really very quickly, with just a few years, and then we're sort of constantly updating the services and so. But I think now it's a different situation for other countries, in the sense that technology is much more advanced. People are using internet much more also for e-commerce, for instance. So in that sense it's easier. There's not this kind of building up process. On the other hand, it's in a way more difficult to change an administrative system that already exists and functions quite well, and to kind of make this big leap to really governance when countries may be using it a little bit. But can use one example from our practice right now. We're working on a project in Namibia, for instance, with the Namibian government, and they are looking to start by integrating governmental databases, and then eventually to start offering more and more services. They already offer some services before this project, but this is during about 2 years. The project is 2 years, when they are looking to actually transform the way databases are interoperable and the way services are accessible. And at the same time as we're working on the technical side, we're then working on legislation, on institutional issues. So in a way, it's not a very long process. It can be done in a few years if all these things happen parallel.
So how much time does it take for the legislative side to actually come up with a draft of a related law, to get it approved, and then to get it implemented, like with the regulations and rules supporting the document?
That can be something which can be a bit of a bottleneck, because of the different procedures in different countries and how slow the process is, which is usually nothing to do with just this area. It tends to be the same. In some countries it's quite slow legislative process. But the good thing here is that there's actually often not a need for so many new laws, but many things can be done by just going through the old legislation, the existing legislation, and see if there is anything in it which hinders use of e-services or which needs to be changed. And if there is something which can perhaps be done to encourage use of e-services. So maybe it's not a need to change the law at all, or maybe just to change a few laws, or otherwise perhaps it can be done by, say, regulations or sort of, let's say, sub-legal acts, so not laws as such. So in that sense, I think it's possible to start with lots of processes even while the work is going on the laws. So again, it doesn't have to be a very slow process.
But mostly will depend on the government itself, I think, right?
It will, and then there are some issues which really one needs to think about, like, say, the data protection legislation. So if in a country there is nothing on data protection, then it may be necessary, like, first to work out a law and to draft it, and then to see if the implementing processes, and that may take a while. It's maybe difficult to rush it too much. If there are some systems, for instance, for data protection, then it will be quicker. They can be amended without changes to the law. So I would say it depends more, actually. It depends on the starting point, but then it depends also on the legal system in the country. It depends a lot on political willingness as well, because if a government is really willing to push this, and if it starts having a dialogue with different stakeholders, and so then I think
especially the civil
society as well, companies. There's lots of possibilities for, say, public-private partnerships, where you can have companies involved in developing things. So I would say the sort of policy process, if there is a real genuine interest and it's an integrated process, so everybody's involved knows what's going on, then I would say there's no reason why not to try to push it, but not too fast, and not to try to do everything maybe straight away. So because people, and what you were asking me before, people need to get used to this and have confidence in these services, and if it happens too fast, then that bit is lost.
Yes, because for example, I will be concerned about my private data not to be phished or not to be used in some contradictory ways. That will be my biggest and foremost concern.
Exactly, and that's why I say also the issue is the same everywhere. We have the same concerns, but it depends perhaps quite a lot on what is the situation in the country when this e-governance process starts. Is it a country which already uses lots of e-services and has paid lots of attention to data protection? Then it's more of a practical process of actually changing the way certain services are delivered. But maybe there is a need to work like generally on this in the society, and so also how to inform people about it.
Yes, because here in Mongolia we're not really get used to much using the internet, the access to internet to do the work or to get the certificates for something, setting up the company, let's say, or we're just getting used to get the information that individual can get about his own like birth certificate or certificate of marriage through the automated machines. So this started almost a year ago. So people are just starting to get used to getting online, getting digital services. So in that regard, what issues you would recommend for Mongolia to be aware of first at this initial stages?
Well, one thing which is usually a good way of starting is with this kind of applications for something that you need some sort of a certificate, or you need some kind of let's say you're applying for a driving license and you need to submit certain papers for it, or whatever it is, that to make such processes automated, because this is first of all something that a lot of people use, and a lot of people would like it to be easier. If you don't have to go to some special office, you don't have to lose time on that. It will also save costs. It will save costs for the administration, but also for the people. It could be very interesting in a country like Mongolia that is so big but few people, so you have long distances. So instead of having to travel somewhere, you could do things online. And the benefit of something like that first is that, as I say, it's attractive, it's easy. It's also maybe doesn't seem so dangerous that you kind of send for something that goes to another authority or so. Then when it comes to actually making, say, a full application of something where everything is only online, that could be then a second step. So at first you may still go at some point to an office or interact by some other way with the person, but it's just that this kind of submission of documents can be done automatically, and then when that is already something people get used to, then it could move to being like we have in Estonia, because we have the digital signatures. We actually never need to go someplace. We can just do it all from home and it will be sent to us electronically. And so, but that's the kind of next step. And then another way of starting, I mentioned this Namibian project, for instance, is that what they're starting with is between government offices, between authorities, that instead of sending papers or having to fill in things or so on paper between authorities, it becomes automated. And this saves already a lot of time and so for the administration, but it's not something that the citizens directly feel. So in an authority, it's easier to pay attention to the data protection, the security, so you can educate people, it's part of their work, etc. So getting those processes automated again then makes it easier after a while to start offering the services. And what I mean with this is the kind of things that one may not always think about, but that goes on a lot, that you need the same information in different places, like people's date of birth, whether they are married, etc., these kind of things. Lots of different authorities need it for different purposes, and it saves a lot of time and money if this happens automatically.
Yes.
If I don't need to ask, send for it, so, but I can actually access another database. So by doing this first on the authority level, that also means that then you have to think of data protection. Even then, it's nothing to do just with individuals, but hopefully then this is thought of and this will be secure, and then eventually then when you move forward, there's already a kind of a good basic legal foundation.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your very good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.